Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new, my name is Emmanuel, and today we're going to be learning how to persist data using CoreData. Alright, and if this is the kind of content that you like, then maybe consider clicking the subscribe button, turn on post notification, because I try as much as possible to release videos like this every week. Okay, so in order to stay focused on our subject, which is learning about CoreData, I decided to implement an application, which is a note-taking application, sort of like a clone of the Apple's Notes app. So I actually have a link in the description to the starter project. So if you're interested in building along with me, then you can just go ahead, take some 2-3 seconds, download the application, and we're going to be on the same page. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and run the application just so that you can see what we currently have. All right. So here we have our notes. And you can see over here the number of notes that are available. We have a search bar in case we have some text, some notes to search. And then right here we have a button to add new notes. I'm just going to say my name is Emmanuel Quara. And I go back, you can see that we have a new note added right here. And I'm just going to go to the next line and say, I am a boy. So I go back, you can see that we have that right here. And this is the time that this note was last updated. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this, and I want to create a new note. So and say this is a new note, and I'm going to go back. You can see that a new note has been added, and that was added to the top. Then you can see I can also go ahead, click on this, and add some more text here, and go back, and you can see that that's now at the top because it was most recently updated. Now another thing we can do is to swipe and delete. You can see that that note is gone. You can add a new note like this, some text like this. It's faster than hacking. So I go back and we have that right here. But now let me show you where things get a little bit messy. So let's say I've written my thesis here and then I relaunch the app and everything is gone. Man, that's going to be crazy. So this is where CoreData comes in. So what we want to do in this video is we want to persist our data so that when you create a new note, it stays stored on the device and you can update that. You can also go ahead and delete it, right? And the search as well should be working. Good. So let me just go ahead and take a few minutes to give you a tour of the code base so that you things make sense a little bit more. So first of all, we're going to head over to the main.storyboard. And right here, just close this guy, we have just two view controllers. The first one is our list. Let me see what it's called. View. So it's our list notes view controller. And the second one is our edit. So this list is basically, as you probably guessed, this particular page, while the edit is the second page. So here we have a navigation controller, and here we have a table view that just fills the entire screen. And then we have a table view cell, as long as it's agrees to. Good. So in the cell, we have a title and we have a description, which is the same thing you just saw. Then in our edit, at the bottom here, we have the label that basically keeps track of the number of notes that are available. We have the button here that takes us to the next screen to add to create a new one. And we actually just use this particular page to both edit and create a new note. So what we have here is simply a text view that just fills the entire screen. That's all. So diving into the code, right here we have our list notes view controller, and nothing fancy. We just have a table view that is populated based off of the text in our notes, and we have all notes and filtered notes because we have a search. So whenever we filter, we're filtering from all notes into filtered notes. And filtered note is where our data is being displayed from, right? So everything is just some extra functions to just help us achieve this application kind of thing. So I'm just going to go to the bottom. So right here is our table view configuration where we have our number of rows and section and our cell for row at index path. And if any of these things don't make sense to you, then I actually have a video on table views if you are interested in watching just that. Or if you are sort of new to iOS development and you want to learn how to build an application like this, then I also have a very nice playlist where we build a food ordering application from scratch. So maybe you could also consider taking that course, and I promise you it's going to be extremely beneficial to you. So yeah, but if you understand all of these things, then man, you're a boss. Good. So yeah, we have our table view set up. This one is responsible for our swipe to delete, and then this guy. And basically what we're doing is we're just removing that particular row that was swiped. We're removing it from the filtered array, and then we're reloading our table view. Okay, so nothing fancy is going on here. We have our search, so based off of the text that you enter, we're just doing a very quick filter from our all notes, and we are adding that to the filtered notes and then reloading our table view, right? Nothing serious. Everything is so simple. So yeah, so the next thing I'd like to show you is our cell, which is very familiar if you follow the Yummy series. We have a setup that it takes in notes, and we're simply just updating the text of the title and the description. So now let's head over to the edit note, and here what we have is just basic design. We have our text view filling up the screen, and when the view appears, that's when the page loads. We just want to make sure that the keyboard comes up, and when you click on the body of the view, then we're just going to resign the keyboard. And another thing that we do right here is we have a delegate for the text view did end editing, and this is when we actually do our saving. So we don't want to be saving every time the user types. If they may be saving something large or something, we don't want to slow the UI in any way. So we are only saving when the user exits that particular text view. So when you click out of it or you go back, so that's when we do our saving. So yeah, then we also have a delegate right here, and what the delegate does is just notifies the list notes view controller whenever there are certain things, like for example, if you delete the notes. So if you don't enter, so if I show you, I click on this, if I enter some text and I go back, you can see that the text is created. But if I come here and I just delete everything, you can see that it just goes. So yeah, delegates like that, the delegate helps us to notify the view controller right here at the bottom, so that it can either refresh. So if there's an update, it just refreshes the table view, and if there's a delete, then it does the delete and just tries to make it or just animate it a little bit. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what we currently have. If you have confusions in any way, if there's something you'd like me to explain further, then feel free to just leave a comment and I'll definitely respond. All right. So now that we're done with this, let's actually go into the main thing, CoreData. So how do we get started with CoreData? Now, if you are trying to use CoreData in a brand new project, so I'm just trying to do that. So new, and I create a project, then I click on app. So if I wanted to create a new project, all I need to do is make sure that use CoreData is selected. And when you do this, it's going to create the project and also initialize some CoreData essentials, right? So, but if you are trying to use CoreData in an existing application, just like we're trying to do here, then the first thing we want to do, we actually have a folder here called models. So we want to click on that and want to create a new file, and this file is going to be of type data model. So we want to create a data model under CoreData. So I'm going to click on that, and for the name, I'm just going to name it the same as my project, which is my notes, like this. So I click on create, and then this file is going to be created for us. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to create our data structure. So what is the structure of the data that we want to store using CoreData? So the answer is this: we want to store note in our device, right? So what we want to do essentially is we want to replicate this data structure in our data model right here. So we have ID of type UUID, we have text of type string, last updated as type date. So how do we do that? We're just going to head over here, and the first thing we want to do is we want to create an entity. So you can think of entity as your like your data structure. So I'm going to call this entity, or I'm going to name it the same as my notes. So this is going to be called notes. The next thing I want to do is I want to create the attributes for our note entity. Now for you to create attributes, you can just click on this plus icon right here or the add attributes right here. So I'm just going to click on this, and the first one I want to create is ID, which is of type UUID. Very simple. I want to create another one which is the text, and that is of type string. And finally we have the last updated, which is of type where you have date. Very simple, very straightforward. Now the next thing I want to do here is I want to select all of these things and just say, well, don't be optional. I want you to be there. Good, great. Now we have all of these things created. The next thing I want to talk about is codegen. And this codegen, before I get to that, I'm just going to select manual, and I'm going to generate this some files. But before I do that, I'm going to head over to notes, because the files we're going to create is going to create a class called notes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy both of these computed properties out of this, or just copy them, right? And I'm going to delete this file. Just delete like that. Move to trash, because we're not going to need that again. This codegen is going to create a class that basically has all of those properties. So now, in order for us to create a class, because remember, when you select our attributes, we have this as manual, right? This is manual. So you're going to go over to editor right here. I'm going to click on create NS managed object subclass. So just click on that. Make sure this is checked. Click on next. Click on next. Notes is checked. And we're going to create that right in this project. Now I'm just going to move both of these files into the models just to keep things more organized. Now let's actually look at these two files and see what they are. Now the first file we have here is, as you can see, it's actually very similar to what we have in our data model. So it is sort of like a representation of that particular UI or that table, that entity. So we have all of the attributes right here, and if, for example, we had some relationships, then those will be here as well. So you can just see this as a code representation of our data model, right? Now for this one, this is a class that is available for us to be able to extend or add some maybe computer properties, some functions that are basically going to serve as like helpers to help us use our, or just access attributes, or just do things with our model, right? And this is a good place for us to paste this particular title and description, right? So we want to be able to do something like a note object.title, which is going to give us the title of that particular note, all right? So this is what this file is for, and this one is for this, okay? Now, let's head back to the data model, and let's click on this and look at this again. So you can see that we have three options: manual, class definition, and category. Now for the manual, you saw that when we clicked on manual, it created two files for us. The first one was this note, CoreData class, right, the note. And the second one is an extension of our note that basically has all of the attributes and relationships, okay? Now if we were to select, let's go, where's that? If we were to select class definition, what this is going to do is it's going to automatically generate these files for us, and they're not going to be visible to us. So XCode is going to basically manage the code generation, right? So one of the advantages of this is, for example, if we were using the manual and we came here and we change the type or just add a new attribute over here, we'd have to go into this place, right, this file, the extension, and we're going to have to modify this as well, or add a new one as well, right? So if you were going to be using the manual, then you're going to make sure, you have to make sure that all of your attributes and all of your relationships, everything matches our data model, okay? But whenever you use the class model, or the class definition rather, then you don't have to do that. XCode just handles everything for you. Make sure that the code and this data model is completely in sync, all right? But the downside is we're not going to have access to this. we're not going to have access to this file, so we're not going to be able to, extend and just add some more functionalities to this. We're just limited to Xcode managing it. Now, heading back here, there's one more that we have, category extension, which is sort of like the good balance between both of them. So what this does is Xcode automatically manages the connection between this file and the data model, but it also allows us to be able to create this. So we can extend, we can put in some additional code or some custom functionalities to this. We can do this while not being bothered about whether or not this particular file is in sync with the data model. So that's what the what's it called again? Category extension does. So I hope that clarifies these options. So anyhow, I'm just going to stick with manual for the sake of this tutorial. And yeah, let's just go ahead and build and see all of the numerous errors that we have. Okay, good. So all right, so we have some errors with regards to optional UUIDs and all these things. So one thing you can do is, of course, go ahead and maybe set some default values or unwrap. So you can use your if let id equals node.id, and then just put this guy right here and just use id. So you can do this. You can just do different ways. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to head over to this file, the extension, and I'm just going to force all of these guys because I'm sure that I'm going to pass them in, right? While creating the object, I'm going to make sure that they exist. Okay? So, but yeah, these are options that you can go with. So I'm just going to go ahead and build this one more time, and you can see that all of the errors have been cleared. So now we have our data model, and we've actually generated our code. The next thing we need to do is to initialize our, or just to get our core data initialized. Okay. Now, if you created a new project and you selected core data, then if you head over to your app.delegates, just go to app.delegates, you're going to see something that looks like this, right? So this is code that was generated while while the project was initialized to support core data. But since this is an existing application, we're going to have to implement this ourselves. So one thing you can do is just copy this code from one file that has it automatically generated, right? And just paste that here, and yeah, it's going to work. But what I want us to do here is I want us to have a CoreDataManager, right? So just so that we can keep things clean and not clog our app delegates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the models folder and hold down Command and N. We're going to create a new file called CoreDataManager. Okay, great. Now, right here, the first thing we want to do is we want to import core data, and then we're going to create a class called CoreDataManager. And I actually want this class to have a singleton. So I'm going to create a static let, and I'm going to call this shared equals CoreDataManager. CoreDataManager. But now we need to also create an initializer. So I'm just going to pause right there, and we're going to create an init that takes in a model name string. And don't worry, I'm going to explain this again, so don't be afraid. All right. So this is going to take in a model name. So now we can go ahead and initialize this, and the model name is simply this guy, the name of our model, our data model, and ours is called my notes. So I'm just going to put a string there and say my notes. Awesome. So now we have our model. Now, before I actually go any further, I'd like to take a minute to explain some things that we're going to come across very well while working with core data. Now, the first thing is called the managed object context. And this is, you can think of it like a sheet of paper that was torn out of a book. So this sheet of paper is like your sandbox, your sketchpad, whatever, notepad or jotter, and you can basically just modify data. You can write some text, you can put some values, you can change them, you can do whatever you want to do. And it's very important to note that that data is not stored until the paper is put back into the book. So it's the same way the managed object context is. You can modify, you can create a context, you can modify the values, you can do whatever you want to do, but that does not affect your UI in any way. Like, it doesn't update your UI or show whatever values you've updated, and it also does not persist that data. The only time the data is persisted is when you save that context. All right, so it's very important to know that. So you can think of your managed context or managed object context as just like your variable, where you can basically set values and modify. And the second thing we need to know is the managed object model. And this is basically like the structure of our data. It has all of the attributes, the entities, the relationships. Basically just describes the kind of data that we're trying to store. So what's the data type, what kind of attributes that are available. That's what the managed object model is. All right. Now the third thing we need to know is the persistent store coordinator, and as the name implies, it coordinates stuff. Right. So what it does is it uses the model, right, the managed object model, to basically serve as a mediator between the context and the store. So what it does essentially is it translates the context into records stored in the device, and also translates records that are stored in the device to context. So it's sort of like the middleman, right, that helps the context to communicate or to get data stored on the device. All right, I hope that makes sense. So finally, the last thing we have is the persistent store container, which basically just helps us to set up our CoreData Stack. And it also gives us some of the attributes or some properties or methods that help us to easily communicate with our context, right? So these are the four main things that we need to know about CoreData. And if you know all of these things, then CoreData is extremely easy, right? Don't worry. So now in our manager, there are three main things we need to do. The first one now is we need to create our container. So remember, the container is what allows us to be able to set up our CoreData Stack. So we need to create our container first. Now, in order for us to create a container, we're going to create a variable right here, and we're going to call this, or just create a constant and call this persistent container. And this is of type ns persistent container. Awesome. So right here, our persistent container is going to be, what am I typing today? It's going to be equal to ns persistent container, and we're trying to create an object, and right here we're just going to pass in the name, which is the model name. All right, very simple, very straightforward. So now that we have this done, the second thing we need to do is we need to load our persistent stores. Now to do that, we're going to create a function right here, and I'm going to just call this function load. All right, now in order for us to load the store, we're going to say persistent container dot load persistent stores. Very simple. And this takes in, or this gives us a couple of parameters. The first one is the description, and the second one is error. So here, we're just going to add a guard statement and say guard error equals nil. So we want to make sure that there's no error. Else, if there is an error, then we're just going to say fatal error and say error.localize description. So just tell us what the error is. Okay. Now, if everything is good, then we're okay. So what I'm going to do is, there are situations, and actually I'm just going to go ahead and force this because I'm sure that there's an error here. So there are situations where a user wants to do something after the load has been, like the loading of stores have been successful. So what we want to do is want to pass in a completion handler. So I'm just going to create a completion, and this is going to be create a bracket like this, and this void. Then, did I get that? One more. Good. So now I'm going to set this to be default as nil, just in case we don't want to do anything after the load is successful. All right. So, but if you want to do something, then yeah, I'm going to show you how that works. So at this point, we know that there is no error. So what we want to do is want to say completion, and it's optional, so we're just going to call it like this. So basically just let me know that it was completed. Now that we have this done, the last thing we need to do is we're just going to come over here and we're going to create a computer property called view context. And this is going to be of type NS managed object context, like this. And what we simply want to return is the persistent container dot view context. That's all. So these are the three main things we need to set up our core data manager. Simple, isn't it? Yeah. So now that we have this, the next thing we need to do is now head over to our app delegates. So app delegates. And in our view did load, did finish launching, sorry, now view did finish launching with options. Right here, we want to load our data store. So how do we do that? We're just going to get our core data manager and say .shared, because we have that, and we're going to call .load. So remember I said if you wanted to do something after a load is completed, then we can do that like this and just say, okay, print the load was successful, and maybe you want to now move to the next page or stop your loader or whatever you want to do here. But in our case, we're not going to do anything, so I'm just going to call the function like that. All right, so now let's go ahead and run this and let's see if everything is still good. Great, so you can see that the application is launched, but if we were to click on this button, we're going to experience a crash. And I'm going to show you why. So remember, whenever we click on this button, let's just go over to the code right there. And that is in list, let's see, list notes view controller. And the button is clicked at the top. Right here. So when this button is clicked, we try to go to the edit note page, but before we go there, we try to create a note. So now let's see what create note does. So creating a note creates a new instance of a note, and then it does all of these things just to update the table. But now this is where things are wrong. Now, since we're using a managed object or a core data object, when we want to initialize a managed object, we don't just initialize it like this, right? What we need to do is we need to initialize it with a context, okay? So whenever we are creating a note, we have to initialize that note with a context. Now, we can do this here and simply just say, because we already have our core data manager .shared, and we have our view context right there. So we can do this, and let's actually just do this, and we're going to run this application. And now I'm going to click on this button, and okay, so now we got another crash, but this is different, and this is because something is missing. So it's trying to unwrap something that does not exist. Okay, so don't worry, we're going to get to that. But what I want to do is I want to move, you know what, let's actually just fix that right here. So let's go back to create note. Okay, right here. So this creates notes. But yeah, it's crashing and saying that unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping optionals, whatever, yada, yada, yada. So it means that some data should be available. And now, when we are creating notes, if you remember, we said that the text, the last updated, all of those values are going to be there, but it is not. So what we want to do is we want to say note equals note dot ID, and this is going to be equal to UUID like this, and note dot last updated equals date. All right, so we're basically just initializing our notes to have both of these texts. So I'm going to run this again, and hopefully we don't get another crash. So I click on this. Ooh, we still have a crash. What's that? Oh, text. Did I miss that? So I'm going to say note dot text equals an empty string. So let's run this again. I click on this, and you can see that it actually worked. So this has created or successfully created an object. But what I want to do is, since I have a manager, I don't want to be doing any kind of core data activities outside of the manager. I want to do that within. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this note, and I'm going to head over to our core data manager. And right here, I'm going to let's mark this and say helper functions. And this is going to be an extension of our CoreDataManager. And the first thing we want to do here is we want to create a function to to create a note. All right, and this function is going to return notes because remember we need these notes in our view controller. So now I'm just going to paste the code that we have there. So creating a note is just note, and remember we're creating a note with a context. And I'm just going to remove this because it's in the same class. And we have our note ID set to be a random UUID. We have the text to be an empty string. And last updated is now, right? So now we have this date. The next thing we want to do is here, we're going to return note. Good. But remember what I said, whenever you modify your context, it doesn't exactly persist, it doesn't save unless you save it. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function that I'm going to call save. So I'm going to say func save, and one of the beauty of this is you can actually just reuse this particular manager in other projects, so you don't always have to do all of these steps, right? I'm just trying to make sure that you see everything I'm doing and also experience some of the crashes, some of the errors, and we learn together, right? So we're going to create a function called save, and what this is going to do is it's going to basically just save the context. So whatever has not been saved, it's just like you know, in school and you're having an examination and everybody's writing, say pens up, someone just comes and collects all of the papers. So this save gets all of the changes that have been made and just stores them in the book or submits. All right, I hope that makes sense. So what we want to do here is before we save, we don't just always want to save, we want to make sure that there's a change. So I'm going to say if view context dot has changes, then we want to say view context dot save. And this actually could throw an error, so you could handle it in different ways. You can use the do catch. So you can just say do, what is happening? So I just say do like that and catch, and say print an error CRUD what while saving. Awesome. So we can go ahead and just show the error. Error.localized. Great. So now that we are using the do catch, we're just going to remove this optional like that, so it can just try and push it to the catch. So this is our save function. Whenever we want to save anything, we just call that function like that. Good. So now we're going to create notes, and when we create notes, this is going to be returned to the view controller. So let's actually head over to our, let's close this. Head over to the list notes, and here we're not going to be doing this anymore. Instead, we're going to say let notes be equal to our CoreDataManager dot shared dot create notes. Awesome. So and now this is our to do. We don't need to do this anymore. This just creates the note and it saves it in the database, and then we update our table to have the new note that we just created, and this is returned to the edit. So I'm just going to copy this, find, yeah, this is returned here, and then we go to the edit notes page using the new note that we just created. I hope that makes sense. So you can see how easy it was for us to create a note in our CoreDataManager. So you just create a new object, make sure that it is created with a context, right? And then you just set whatever default parameters you need to set. If you don't, then you don't need to do all of these things. Make sure you save, and that's it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this application, and I'm going to create a new note, and I'm going to put some text, even though nothing's going to happen. I'm going to go back, and okay, you can see that there. I'm going to run the application one more time, and we still don't see the note. So why is that? So the thing is, even though we have the note saved locally, we need to fetch it. So that's the next thing we're going to do over here. We're going to create a function to fetch notes. All right, and this function is going to return an array of notes. Good. So how do we fetch data from CoreData? It's actually pretty simple. Now, if you remember, I don't know if you noticed that, but right here in our extension, we actually have a function right here called fetch request. And what this does is it allows us to be able to fetch all of the data for notes in our core database. All right. So going back here, I'm going to create a request, and this request is going to be equal to, or well, I need to specify a type. So this is going to be of type ns fetch request, and we need to specify the type as notes. All right. So we're trying to generate a fetch request that's going to return data of type note. And this is going to be equal to note dot fetch request. So remember, we are able to access this because this is a class method. All right, so we just use the name and then dot the method name. Good. So now we have our request over here. The next thing we want to do is whenever, as we remember from our demo, when we fetch all of the notes, they are ordered in a particular order. They are arranged based off, so the first one is the most recently updated note. So what we want to do is we want to sort. Now, in order for us to do that, we're going to need to create an ns sort descriptor. So we're going to say let's sort descriptor like this be equal to ns sort descriptor like that. And this takes in a couple of parameters. We're going to use the key, and we're going to use ascending. And actually, rather than using key, I could actually just use key path. And let me show you what key path allows us to do. Rather than specifying the key, which is the key that we want to sort by, in our case, is going to be last updated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say notes dot, or I'm going to put a backward slash like that and say notes dot last updated. All right. Then ascending is going to be false because we want to go descending. Right. So basically, this prevents us from having to type in last updated like string. And if you have this in multiple places, you know, it's going to be more difficult for you to manage this change. But if you use this, then. So now that we have this, the next thing we're going to need to do is say request dot sort descriptors, and this actually is an array. So we're just going to have to create an array and do this like that. So as you probably guessed, if you have multiple sort parameters or sort conditions rather, then you can create all of them and then you just pass them in to your array. Okay, so now we have that added. All we need to do is say return, which is what we're going to be returning, and we want to return our view context dot fetch. And you can see that it requires a parameter request and its fetch request, and we have that. All right. Now this actually throws, so we're going to need to try. So I'm just going to put a try right there, and I really don't care for our development purposes whether or not this fails. So I'm just going to do this, and let's wrap this in parentheses and just add a default element to your array. But if you were doing this in like a live application, then maybe you want to handle it the same way we did over here, just so that you know, it's more descriptive and it's not just going to be returning an empty array every time something goes wrong. Right? So this allows us to be able to fetch the notes. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our list note, and right here we're going to find, so under this place where we say fetch notes from storage. So this is just a function, and this is called, let me show you, it's called or should be called in our viewed load. So in our viewed load, we want to get all of the, where is it? So right here, I want to say fetch notes from storage, right? And to implement this, let's go to that, fetch all notes. To implement this, what we're going to say is we're going to say CoreDataManager .shared .fetch notes. Okay, and this is going to return what? It's going to return an array of notes, and we're simply going to replace that with all notes, and this is going to be equal to that. So let's go ahead and run this and let's see. Awesome. So you can see that it actually brought the note we created, and this is 2:24 a.m. You can see the time is 2:37, so you can see that it was created a while back, right? So this is, and let's actually just go ahead and create another one, and I'm just going to do this and go back. So it's created a new note, and I'm going to run this again, and we should now see two values in our notes. So you can see that it's actually saving the note and is getting the note. So the next thing we want to do is we want to update our notes. So when you make changes here, we want to update the note value in our database, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to head back into our manager, because the manager is where we do everything. So manager, and we're going to create a new function. And actually, rather than creating a function, let's actually go over to our edit note, and we're going to scroll down to this function right here. So whenever we stop editing the text in our text view, this particular function is triggered. So the first thing that happens is it gets the text in the text view and it updates the value of notes. That's actually why this guy works, like it shows the text. But when it's done, then it checks whether or not it's empty. Then if it is empty, it calls the delete node function. If it is not empty, it calls the update node. So now let's head over to update node and see what happens. So right here, it is setting the last updated date to be now, which is good. And we also know that the value of text has also been updated, which is also good. And then this one is to simply refresh the notes in the UI. We're not going to be bothered about that for now. So basically, the only thing that is left here is to save. So remember from the first thing I said, whenever you update or edit the text in your context, in your managed object context, you have to save it. If not, it's not going to be persisted. So how do we save that? So what we want to do is right here, after the last date has been updated, we want to say CoreDataManager.shared.save. That's it. So now I'm going to, let's go back to our core manager. Okay, no, yep. And let's build this and make sure that we have no errors. Okay, build succeeded. And then we can run this. And so we have some empty text there. I'm just going to write some text and I'm going to go back. And now I want to restart the application. And you can see that the text actually stayed persistent. You can see how easy this is. And it's just crazy. So now this is the second line. And I go back. You can see that that is there. I run the application. You can see that that is there. So now the next thing I want us to do here is to handle the delete. So you can see that now we go back and this went, but when I run the application, you see that the value is still there, right? It didn't delete. So what we want to do is want to implement the delete functionality of in our CoreDataManager. So right here, I'm going to create a function and I'm going to call this delete note. And in order for us to delete an object, we need that object. So we're going to pass in note to this function. And all we need to do here is say view context dot remove, delete. And we're going to take this option that has object. And this here, we're just going to pass in note. All right. So this is going to delete this context or this object from the context. And when we're done, remember, we're going to call save. So now I'm going to run the application. And for this one we have, I'm just going to go back. So it has deleted. And I'm going to run the application and we should still see it because I forgot something very important. Come over here. We need to go over to our delete function here. And we need to use our CoreDataManager.shared and we need to call delete node. And what node do we want to delete? We want to delete node.id. And actually want to do that after here, since we need the ID here. Nope, not node.id. Good. So let's run this. Okay, can't find. Oh, why did I say node? Note. Let's run the application. And I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go back. So it should have deleted that right now. I'm going to run the application again. And of course, we don't see that node. So it means that it was actually deleted. Man, doing this in simple is just making me. So you can see that if you have your, like with your manager, if you have everything set up properly here, you can see that CoreData is actually really easy to use. You just have your manager, and in your view controller, you can just call simple functions here, and they just do all of the things and send you some data back. All right. So yeah, that's that. You can see that we're actually done with this particular page. So now you can add some text. You can go back. You can create a new note. We can add some more text and just say, I love Eric Cartman, and he is evil. Haha, I don't know why I love him then. Anyhow, so we go back, we see we have a new one created. I'm going to click on this and say some more text, and you can see that now that has come up because it was just most recently updated. So now the next thing we need to do, you can see if I delete this guy and I run the application again, you're going to see that it still remains, right? So what we want to do is we want to head over to our list notes, and we want to find right here this function that says delete note from storage, and this function is simply called when the swipe is done, right? So when you try to delete like this, then it calls this function, or it comes here, and this calls this function to delete the notes. And how do we delete the notes? We simply want to call our CoreDataManager and shared, and we want to delete notes. So what node do we want to delete? We already have that right here. So yeah, we run this now, and we should be able to delete I love Eric Cartman because I don't love him. And so we have this error, and actually this happened because this was deleted. So at this point, this is nil. So it's something you actually need to be aware of. That was why I moved the other one down. So just remove that comment. So we want to remove it from the table view, and then we want to delete it because it doesn't exist. Or you could get a reference to the ID, and then you can do this guy first and then do this. So whatever one you want. So we're going to run this again, and it was actually deleted. It's just that it crashed before I updated table view. So now I'm just going to create this one, and I'm going to go ahead and delete it. You can see that it's gone. I run it again, and we should only see one object there. Awesome. Now, the next thing I want to show you is, so now we have this done, and I don't know if you noticed this, but this guy is also reacting appropriately. Right, so that's pretty neat. So the next thing I want us to work on, which is actually the last thing for this video, is the search. So when you type some stuff, it actually just filters. So let me just go ahead and show you what the code looks like over here. When you try to search right here, it's doing a simple filter, right? But when you click on the search button, when you click on, where is it? Yeah, when you click on the search button, then it actually searches notes from storage. So right here now, if I type some text, or let me just create a new note and say, my name is Emmanuel, and I go back. So now I want to search for Emmanuel. Now if I click on the search icon, you see that it now is searching notes. So now, in order for us to implement this functionality, let's actually go over to the search notes function. So this is basically doing the same thing as the fetch. The only difference now is we want to fetch, but add some filter. And for CoreData, this is known as predicates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the CoreDataManager, and rather than creating a new function, I'm going to modify the fetch notes function to take in an extra parameter. Now this parameter is going to be called filter, and it's going to be of type string. Now the default value is going to be nil, so that if you call this function with a fetch note, like if you just call the function without any filter, then it's going to fetch, it's just going to do and get all of the notes in the database, right? But if you were to pass in some text to filter by, so I'll just do this, and then we want to basically filter the data that is being requested from the database. Now to do that, we're going to have to create a predicate, which is of type ns predicate, like this. And this actually takes in a format and some arguments. Now for the format, there's actually a variety of things we can do. If you check Apple's documentation, I'm going to leave a link to this particular thing, you can see that there are quite a lot of things we can do. You can format, you can do things like check if it is equal to this, you can check if it is like this, you can check if it contains, and then we have CD like case and deck, trick, insensitive, lookups. So, and this is actually what we want. So we want to check if a particular text is contained in another text or another string. So what we want to do is we want to say, so let's actually look at the format. So name contains this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if text, which is our attribute, right, text, if that contains, regardless of the case, and if it contains, if we want to specify a string, then we can say something like Emmanuel, like this, or just use single quote like this, and say Emmanuel. But what we want to do is we want to pass in a variable, which is this guy. Since the variable is of type string, what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with percentage and at. So this basically serves as a placeholder for a string. Now this string is going to be filter right here. Okay, so basically we're trying to create like a query, sort of like a query right here. We're saying, I want you to filter, get me all the text or all the values from the database where the text field contains this particular word or sentence that was passed in here. All right, so now that we have that done, what we need to do is say request dot predicate, and this is going to be equal to predicate. Awesome. So now with this slight modification, we can use the same function and then pass in a filter, and it's going to return an array. It's going to return an array of filtered text. So in our list notes right here, what we want to do is we want to say CoreDataManager shared dot fetch notes, and for the filter, we're just going to pass in text. All right. So this is going to return an array of notes. So we want to set that to, so we just say all notes is going to be equal to this. So this is going to update our filtered list, and we're just going to say table view dot reload data. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and run this, and just to confirm, let me see if this guy is being called. So yeah, it is called whenever we click on the search button. Awesome. So I should have known that. So anyhow, so I click on this. Even though we have this filter over here, when I click on this search, then it does the search again. And I don't know, maybe I should, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment out our filter just so that we're sure that it actually works. So we're going to head over to the search right here, and I'm going to remove this and run this application one more time. I want to make sure that the search is coming from our core data rather than the filter. So now I've written Emmanuel and it didn't search, but when I click on search, you can see that now it brings up Emmanuel. I click on this and everything works well. I remove this and I just write E and I search. You can see that we have more options. So you can see that, yeah, this actually works, and it's just a single function that allows us to be able to fetch all. And if you pass in a filter, then we're able to fetch and filter based off of the kind of text that we're passing. Right. So you can see we've actually done a lot of awesome stuff here. And I actually understand that it may be a lot of information at the same time. So feel free, slow down and just watch the video. And if you have questions, please just go ahead and ask in the comment section. And if you enjoyed, if you learned some things, then maybe smash the like button, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. And in the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go one step further. And if you look at our view controller, you'd see that we had to deliberately monitor and update our UI based on the events that were carried out. So for example, if you delete a note, we had to go find the record, delete it from the data source, and delete it from the table view just so we have that kind of nice animation. So we had to do a lot of manual labor right here. So in our next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to basically remove all of those things, and we're going to refactor this code so that our UI is reacting based off of the values or changes that are made to the core data. All right. So basically what we're going to do, or what we're going to have in the next video, is whenever you add data to our core database, whenever you add data, then the UI just adds that to the table view. If you change data, then the UI just updates the UI and then changes the value. If you delete, then it just deletes. So we're going to build it and make it more reactive, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun, trust me. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Again, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next video.